Hello everyone, and welcome to a super fun video. I'm Seth, probably known... I'm gonna start that. How did I mess that up? I've said that like 10 billion times. All right, we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that over. Do you need some new Innistrad Crimson Vow cards? Well, you can get them all from our sponsor, Card Kingdom, by heading over to cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish and even get a free MTGGoldfish sticker. Just let them know you want one in your order notes, and they will hook you up. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and today we got one of my favorite videos. Every set release, it is time to talk about the top 10 commander cards from the set being Innistrad Crimson Vow, and joining me to do this, of course, is Tomer. How's it going today, Tomer?
I'm doing well, Seth. How's you?
I'm doing great. I love talking about new Magic cards, and we got some really fun cards to talk about today on our list. So we're doing this, well, I guess the way we have the last couple of sets. Me and Tomer each made a top 5 list, and we're going to count down my top 5 and Tomer's top 5. And Tomer, we should probably let people know, these are not like the CDH cards of the set or the most spiky cards. What are these cards actually about?
This is basically our top 10 most hyped cards. The cards that we are personally the most excited to run in Commander as quickly as possible, as soon as we get our hands on them. So it's not a power ranking scale. It's not like a CDH, power level guide or whatever. There's people who are more qualified to cover, what are the most powerful CDH cards. This is just like a hype list. It's what we're personally hyped for, what we're most excited to play with immediately.
Yeah, these are cards that I just can't wait to stick into decks and see what they can do. And we got some good ones to talk about, which probably means we should jump into it and start counting down these cards. So we can definitely keep the overall video length to a half hour this time, right, Tomer? We're going to do it?
Every single time we nail it. 30 minutes or it's free. That's our motto here.
Well, first up, we got my number 5 card, and this might be a bit of a dark horse. I don't know why I love this card so much. It's Olivia's Attendants. Olivia's Attendants, when I first read it, I was like, oh my god, this card's so bad. It's a 6-mana 6/6. It's got to deal damage to make blood tokens. It can ping something for 3 mana. That's not very efficient. But then it kind of sunk in that this doesn't say combat damage. This can make blood tokens when it deals any damage. So with the card itself, you can pay 3 and ping something and make a blood token. That's not very exciting, but there are shenanigans for this card. Like, this is the card I think that can make the most blood tokens out of any card printed in the set, and I'm actually really excited about the shenanigans that blood tokens can pull off. So this card, the most easy way to make a ridiculous amount of blood tokens is something like Chandra's Ignition, which just makes a creature deal damage equal to its power to essentially everything, all the other creatures, all the players. Like, that's a 2-card combo that in most Commander games, when there's, a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, 3 opponents, you're probably going to make like 100 blood tokens or something. There's also like Arcbond that you can Arcbond, Blasphemous Act, and make a ridiculous number of blood tokens. And then it just does really, really sweet things. Like, I'm not excited. Well, I mean, I would play this in a blood token vampire deck, but I'm not really excited to play this in just like a random vampire deck. I want to do artifact shenanigans with this, where you have things that just care about how many artifacts are out in the battlefield. You got like Darksteel Juggernaut, you got Marxists of Keld, you got Hellkite Igniters, and various Tezzerets that just want like as many artifacts on the battlefield as possible. And then you can sack them all to a Togs, or like ping your opponent a million times to Reckless Fireweavers when artifacts come into play, or sack them and trigger Disciple of the Vault a bunch of times. So I want to do like artifact aristocrat combo shenanigans with this card. But Tomer, what do you think about Olivia's Attendant? Am I super hyped about this random 6-drop for no reason?
No, I think you nailed it. It's kind of funny how the blood token, as being artifacts, they're not necessarily the best for vampire decks. Like, they're okay for vampire decks, especially the Madness variants, where you can, use its Rummage ability to discard a vampire with Madness and get even more value out of it that way. But like you said, blood tokens are really good in decks that care about having a ton of artifacts on the battlefield. So for all the reasons that you just listed, like, you can tap them for mana essentially with Inspiring Statuary. You can sacrifice them for mana with Krark-Clan Ironworks. You can ping people to death with like Reckless Fireweaver on the battlefield. So having super efficient artifact token generators is really where these blood tokens are at. And a lot of different archetypes got really efficient blood token effects. And this one is definitely one of the best. And it's for like burn style decks as well. And for all of the reasons you listed, is going to be pretty amazing. Like Arcbond and Chandra's Ignition. I'm sure there's other ways of dealing a ton of damage with Olivia's Attendants. And outside of combat as well, but also every single turn, it's a 6 with menace. It's pretty easy, I think, to think that you could probably smack in, deal damage to anything, and make 6 blood tokens per turn with the attendant itself, and then anything else is like gravy. So it's crazy how efficient of an artifact token generator this really is.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting aspects of blood tokens is just how cheap they are to make compared to other artifact tokens. Like, we would never see an effect, I don't think, like this for, like, clues, for example. It's, at least we haven't yet. Like, in general, Wizards makes it kind of hard to make a ton of clues, kind of relatively hard to make a ton of treasure tokens. But with blood tokens, I think by far they're the easiest artifact token to just make a ridiculous amount of. It is awkward that it's not especially good in a vampire deck. Like, I'd play it in Anj or like Strephon, the new precon commander, or I play it in old Anj in like a madness deck, but I wouldn't just play this in a vampire deck, even though it is a vampire. And I think that's a theme with blood tokens in general. Like, most of the blood token producers are not very good in vampires. They're just generic, like beat down Edgar style vampires or whatever, but they definitely have a role, and I'm excited for it. I think this card can do some really fun things.
Yeah, absolutely. Not very good in Edgar Markov, but in a lot of different style of vampire decks, and especially artifact decks, this is going to be a powerhouse.
Well, let's move forward to Tomer's number 5 card. We got another tribal card, sort of. Howlpack Piper / Wildsong Howler. A new take on Elvish Piper, kind of, with a really huge upgrade. But Tomer, what are you thinking about this one in the Commander format?
So I would call this one of the best werewolves ever printed. I'd put it in my top 5, and it's definitely the best in Crimson Vow. And as someone who enjoys werewolf tribal, at least playing it on MTGO, I like it a lot less when you have to play it on paper and you have to constantly remember day and night and constantly flipping your stuff back and forth. Not so much a fan of that, but on MTGO, on digital, I'm a very big fan of werewolves. So I had to make a shout out to, I think, one of the best werewolves ever printed, Howlpack Piper. Like you said, it's very similar to Elvish Piper, where both of these can pay a little bit of mana and tap itself to put a creature from your hand directly into the battlefield. If this one is totally upgraded, obviously the activated abilities, you have to pay 1 more mana, but if you put a wolf or a werewolf, you get to untap it. So you can realistically do this multiple times in a single turn. And this is a great way for the werewolf deck to kind of establish a board state, put all the creatures in your hand onto the battlefield without actually casting them. And this allows you to kind of guarantee that you're going to switch from day to night, at least on your turn, flipping all your werewolves, while still, developing your board and not really missing out on tempo. And also, werewolves and wolves are generally kind of on the more expensive end. So generally speaking, you're going to be saving mana using this ability to put everything on the battlefield. Can't be countered is a nice little benefit as well. And then the other interesting thing, the backside is just as good, honestly. Whenever it transforms into Wildsong Howler, you get to look at the top 6 card of your library. So you have a great card selection, and then you put a creature card from among them into your hand. And this happens every single time it transforms. And something that I've been noticing with werewolf decks in multiplayer is that the flipping between, the human side to the werewolf side can happen, more than once per turn cycle. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen, and it will happen usually at least once, especially with Tovolar or Howlpack, guaranteeing that you flip or whatnot. So you can be drawing, you could dump your hand with the Piper, flip your stuff, have a mana discount while doing it, and then refill your hand with the Howler side, transforming back and forth from that. And it's just so efficient. It literally does everything a werewolf deck wants. It wants to flip your creatures, and it wants to get more card advantage, and this does both really, really efficiently. So I'm super hyped. I was said piped. I'm super piped for this card to show up in my werewolf deck. It's so fun.
Yeah, this card is pretty awesome. I would agree this is the best werewolf from the set. I think not being counterable is actually a pretty big upside, especially in our play group where we're playing against Crim, and Crim always has like 20 counters. Plus, it kind of makes your other werewolves, not only is it ramping you by putting them into play, but it's making those uncounterable as well. You don't have to worry about casting your big, whatever, Tovolar's Huntmaster or whatever that new hexproof thing is, and getting it countered by, you know, one of your opponents, because you can just put it directly into play, which is super powerful. The only thing I dislike about this card, it's a little bit weird with the Innistrad Midnight Hunt werewolves. One of the things Wizards did that was new is they made sure it kept their abilities on both sides. These ones are kind of more like the original werewolves, so you only get the Elvish Piper mode on the front half of the card. And I've definitely had some games, there's certainly upside here where it flips back and forth a bunch, but I've also had some games where I call it the Duskwatch Recruiter problem, where I've had a Duskwatch Recruiter that I really need to be able to activate to draw me cards with the front side, but it gets flipped to the back side, and then I just can't get it to flip back around, and I really want, you know, that front side ability. So hopefully that's fine, and it's not a big deal. And in Commander, you know, werewolves are flipping back and forth quite a bit, so I think it should be fine, but that is something that's worth keeping in mind. There might be games where you really want the front side, and it's nighttime, and it comes in on the back side, and you draw a card, and you're happy to draw a card, but it's still not exactly what you wanted. Also, interacts really well with haste, you know, Rhythm of the Wilds and cards like that. This coming down with haste, especially in the mid to late game, is really, really frightening, because then you can start activating it right away, and you don't got to keep your 2/2 sitting on the battlefield for a turn. But yeah, this card, great in werewolves, and I think it also, if you're playing Elvish Piper, I think I would just play this over Elvish Piper and like Mael or Xenagos, whatever the random like big creature decks that occasionally play Elvish Piper. I think this is just an upgrade there too, even if you aren't putting wolves and werewolves into play. It can be countered, you get a bigger body, you're going to draw cards sometimes. It's just better in basically every way.
I mean, I think the activated ability on the Piper is 1 green instead of 1 and a green with the Piper.
I think that's still totally worth it. To
Can't
get to like draw on the backside,
and you get to draw cards. Yeah, I think this might be an upgrade on it. I don't usually play Elvish Piper that much, but this one definitely, like, I didn't even think about outside of werewolves. But yeah, this one probably can get there for non-werewolf decks as well. I mean, you don't get to, you know, machine gun down a bunch of werewolves and wolves from your hands because they don't untap it, but you know, you can put any creature card, and also you draw any creature from the flip side too. So yeah, it's actually legit.
Anyway, let's keep moving on. Let's move on to my number 4 card. And you know me, the thing I like to do most in Commander or all of Magic is to draw cards. And we have Eruth Tormented Prophet, which is an insane amount of card draw. It essentially turns any card draw effect into a light up the stage. So instead of drawing a card, you exile 2 cards, you get to play them this turn. This card is absolutely absurd. Like, the amount of card advantage this can generate is we've really never seen anything like this before. When you consider in the past, like, cards that let you draw 2 cards whenever you draw a card, usually that affects like 7 mana. We have a couple that are like 4 to 5 mana, but they don't include your draw for the turn, so you have to be drawing extra cards to take advantage of them. But really, this is super competitively costed for what it does, and I think this card is just crazy. I'm just imagining casting like a Brainstorm and drawing 6 cards, or casting a Consider and an Opt and drawing 2 cards. Like, that is very, very powerful. I think there's also an interesting twist here. One of the things I like about this is there is a bit of a drawback. Like, if you're trying to play some sort of control style deck, this triggers on all your draws. So essentially, you're not getting cards in hand. Anything you draw, you got to use that turn or you're going to lose it. So you can't just sit there and, you know, hold a bunch of counter spells and hold a Wrath for the next turn, because once this is on the battlefield, everything you draw is going to be going to exile, must be used immediately. But the upside in like prowess style decks, in spellslinger style decks, turning all of your draws into 2 draws when you don't really care. You want to cast a bunch of spells in the same turn and storm off, or go off with your prowess or your spellslinger, your magecraft effects or whatever. In a deck like that, this is just absolutely insane. But Tomer, what do you think about Eruth in Commander?
I think you nailed it. I don't know if I'd be jamming it into just like any Izzet deck, because usually my Izzet decks, you know, run a fair bit of counters and, you know, doesn't really want to storm off. But in any deck that, you know, wants to be aggressive, wants to have explosive turns, that's where Eruth shines. So like you said, like the prowess deck, like Adeline, I think, no, not Adeline. Adeliz?
Adeliz, yeah. Adeliz the Cinderwind. Yeah. I think
that one, it looks really sick. Yeah. I can't, yeah, they're both, aren't they so similar? Adeline and Adeliz? Maybe they need to, Wizards of the Coast need to lay off the Ada something, you know?
I think they're just running out of names. They've used so many names over the past 30 years that they're all just kind of blending together a little bit.
The random name generators, they need a new one. So yeah, it's pretty good in Storm, in Prowess, and anything where you just want to dump your hand as quickly as possible. This is pretty insane. Like you said, there are stuff that says, like, you know, you draw twice as many cards. Like, I think the cheapest one right now is Teferi's Ageless Insight. It's a 4-mana blue enchantment, but like you said, it doesn't. I don't think it counts the draw step. It is only after, like, the card you draw after your draw step or whatever. Not counting that one.
Yeah. You have Thought Reflector that does it for anything, but yeah, Teferi's Ageless Insight and Alhamret's Archive exclude your draw steps specifically.
Yeah, and this is 3, and it can be in your command zone, so you can build around it. So I expect this to be either in the 99 of, you know, those explosive decks, like you said, but also as a commander, it might be one of the best Storm commanders. I don't know how it compares to Vadrik. I don't know if, like, I think a mana discount is more important than doubling your draw. I could be wrong there. But either way, they're both going to be really, really sick, and as part of the 99, there's a ton of potential there as well.
Yeah, I'm mostly viewing it as a 99 card. Like, I think it is fun to build around, and in some sort of like Wizard Prowess style deck or something, I think this could be a really good commander in a Storm style deck, but I'm mostly excited just to jam it in the 99. That said, you do got to be careful. Like, it does create a replacement effect, so this is like actively bad in some of the Niv commander decks, because Niv cares about your drawing cards. What are you gasping about, Tomer? What did I miss?
Okay, because you said replacement. Okay, so how about this? Jeskai stacks rule of law effects. You know, players can't draw more than one card each turn. Boom, you have Eruth. Well, I'm not drawing cards.
Ooh.
Wait, does that work or does it not? I'm not even sure.
Actually,
like,
I'm not sure if that works, because I think it says if you would draw a card.
Yeah,
so I don't think you actually draw a card. Although,
okay.
There is a shenanigan I just thought of with this ability. It also keeps you from dying to milling out, because it's replacing your card draw by exiling the top 2 cards. So that's probably not something that comes up very often, but you can live forever with an empty library with an Eruth on the battlefield because of that replacement effect, which is kind of cute.
Yeah.
I'm imagining Joyra would be insane with this. Like, just casting so many spells, or like Kaikar.
It's like, a legendary too, so it triggers as well.
Kaikar, you make all the mana with Kaikar, and this gives you the cards, and you just combo off and win. So I think there's a ton of possibilities with this card.
Maybe Exile matters, because like Prosper is in Rakdos, Belborka is Boros. We don't have an Izzet, but like if you can mix all of them together, you get like 4-color Exile matters style deck. It could be really fun. I don't know. I'm getting more and more pumped about this card.
Exile Mist Hologriffin, and you can cast it at a later date. You don't have to cast it in the same turn. That's a combo there. All right, let's keep moving forward. We got another good one to talk about. Number 4 on Tomer's list. We got some white card draw. Welcoming Vampire. Of course, only once per turn. That's how white does its card draw these days. But this card still seems incredibly powerful as like a upgraded Mentor of the Meek. But Tomer, this is your card. Take it away.
I mean, I think you nailed it. Like, I'm so excited to see actual good white card draw. Like, it's been a long road for Wizards of the Coast to try and solve the lack of card draw in white. And in Commander, basically the 2 main important attributes of any deck is going to be mana and card draw. Those are the 2 most important resources, and generally speaking, the decks that make the most mana and produce make the most mana the quickest and the most mana efficient, you know, paying the least amount for the most high impact spells, so like mana free spells like Fierce Guardianship and whatnot. And the ones that draw the cards the most efficiently as well are the decks that are going to surge ahead and be the most powerful. So white not having one of those aspects entirely is a problem. And it took like many, many years for Wizards of the Coast to finally admit that, hey, maybe this multiplayer format, we need to change things up for white. And like about 2 years ago, there was admittance that, we're going to try and fix White's card draw issue. Many years later, 2 years later, we didn't get a lot of good options. We got Esper Sentinel recently. That's by far the best, and it's an anomaly, I think. But this is a legit card draw that I'm really happy with. It's 3 mana. You don't have to pay any extra mana whenever you're drawing a card with this. You just need creatures with power 2 or less entering the battlefield. Really easy to do in white. White's one of the best colors in terms of making small creatures and generating tokens and whatnot. So it's basically a 3-mana Phyrexian Arena on a stick at the very least. You're going to be drawing at least 1 card per turn pretty reliably with this without paying any extra mana, unlike Mentor of the Meek, where you have to pay 1 mana for each creature entering the battlefield, which, it's uncapped, but, if you're in white, so how much mana are you going to have available to draw multiple cards? So this is way better early to mid-game at the very least. And then it's once per turn, which, it sucks. I don't even know. I don't even think it's needed there, to be honest. I honestly don't think it's needed there if you see, like, literally any other color drawing cards. But it is once each turn, so you can potentially be drawing multiple cards per turn cycle. And that's where Welcoming Vampire gets really, really good. Like, one card that is a staple in a bunch of different white decks, actually, is White Mane Lion, which is a 2-mana creature with flash. And whenever it enters its battlefield, you return a creature from the battlefield to your hand. So you can literally bounce itself, and for 2 mana, you can just repeatedly, draw a card. It's like one of the best cards in like God Eternal Abika, for example, or God Eternal Oketra, for example, and it sees play in other decks as well. So if you can be drawing more than 1 card per turn cycle, this card is amazing. But worst case, you're drawing 1 card per turn cycle. Medium case, you're drawing 1 card per turn cycle. It's still very good, and it's not insane. It's not oh wow, and white no longer needs card draw. This is fantastic. No, I would like better than this, but it's such a great first step. Good job, Wizards of the Coast. I gotta give kudos when kudos is due, and this is a great start. Great start.
I think this card is actually like pretty great as well. Sure, it is a once per turn restriction, but really not paying mana is a huge deal compared to Mentor of the Meek. You mentioned some of the shenanigans with it, like White Mane Lion. I think that is a really obvious way to make it even better. Also, it doesn't say non-token. So if you have something that can just tap to make a token at instant speed, which white has plenty of, there's artifacts that do that. That's another way that you can be triggering this on your opponent's turn pretty consistently. And when this is drawing 2 or 3 cards every turn cycle, then that's a incredibly powerful effect. So I think this is just kind of a white staple that pretty much a lot of anything that's kind of like a weenie style deck is probably going to play. Mentor of the Meek is kind of a staple in its own right, and I think this is probably just better. In most decks at least. You do lose like 8-a-line attacks, and you make 3 tokens, and you pay 3 and you draw 3. Like, there are some shenanigans with Mentor of the Meek that Welcoming Vampire can't do, but I think this is very comparable in power level, and I'm glad Wizards did this, because it wasn't that long ago Wizards was saying Mentor of the Meek was a color pie break, and they didn't want to print it or reprint it or make more cards like that. So I think even if this is only like 90% there as far as what we want out of white card draw, just the fact that Wizards is willing to print a card like this is a really good sign for the future of card draw in white, because they're definitely heading in the right direction, and this is actually like a playable card draw effect that I will put in many white decks.
Yeah, they started with, white is not allowed to draw cards because you just can't. It's impossible. Technology isn't there. To now we have white can draw cards, but you have to jump through a very specific hoop, and it's capped to once each turn. You know what? It's progress. We'll get there eventually. Also, the only annoyance about this card that I will say is that it doesn't play well with Anthem effects. So usually if you have a deck that consistently makes small creatures, like go wide token decks, which is like Adeline and whatnot, you want to pump up those creatures so you can actually finish the game with a coat of arms effect or a million different other Anthem effects that white has access to. And those cards turn off Welcoming Vampire, which is kind of unfortunate. So that's a little bit awkward It also doesn't trigger on your opponent's creatures having power 2 or less creatures on entering the battlefield. Just like if you compare it to like Morbid Opportunist, which is a death trigger that, you know, it benefits your deck obviously because you're putting in an aristocrat deck, but it also triggers off your opponent's creatures dying too, and that's a 3 mana creature that does that, and it's also once a turn. It was from the last set, and it's an uncommon, so it's kind of weird that an uncommon is outstaging this new white rare. And, you know, obviously it looks utterly pathetic when you compare it to like Toski or, you know, other colors. But you know what? I'm not getting negative. I really like Welcoming Vampire. This is really good. You can get back with Sun Titan. That's cool. Good job, Wizards. Just more, please. Better, please.
Well, I think we'll just leave it. We'll leave it right there and go on to our next card. Sticking in the realm of white card draw, I have a white card draw spell that I like even more than our last one. Ooh. Wedding Ring. Oh my goodness, I love this card so much. I don't even know if this card's actually that good, but I just love this card. 4 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, when you cast it, you give your opponent a copy of it, and then whenever an opponent who controls it draws a card, you get to draw a card, and whenever an opponent who controls an artifact named Wedding Ring gains life, you get to gain that much life. So this is the ultimate friends card. Tomer, I think right now during this video, we need to promise that we will always target each other with the Wedding Ring for at least the next season of Commander Clash. Then we both draw cards. We can work on killing Richard. We can kill Krem, and we cannot fight over card draw. So deal. What do you say? Deal? But really though, it is ultimate.
You're on your knee, you're showing me the wedding ring, and you know what, Seth? I'm gonna say yes.
Yes, okay.
You have a deal.
But really, you have a deal. But really, outside of friendship, this is a card that I like because it's a group hug style card or a political style card that, if you're willing to build around it a little bit, does end up benefiting you more than it benefits your opponent. So on its face, you just play this in your deck with no tricks. You cast it. I choose Tomer. When Tomer draws a card, I draw a card. When I draw a card, Tomer draws a card. Same for life gain. That's still somewhat helpful for a white deck, which is still, not that great at drawing cards. Sure, you're helping one other opponent, but 2 of your opponents are not getting any cards out of it. However, where it gets more exciting is if you can start cloning this or bouncing it and giving it to multiple opponents. If you can, let's say, put a mechanized production on this and you get 2 or 3 or 4 of these on the battlefield or any of the other clone effects, then all of a sudden this becomes really, really strong, where sure, Tomer's drawing a card, but I'm drawing 2 or 3 cards every turn cycle, and that's actually really powerful. So I'm excited about some of those shenanigans. They're definitely janky build-arounds. I think as far as where this fits, the best home is probably Osgir, because Osgir can make a copy of it by itself and break that symmetry. But I still think this is just a really fun card. And also the thing we kind of glossed over is you can use it to get political favors out of it. Like whoever you give this to, it's like the opposite of cursing someone. Whoever you give this to is probably going to be your friend for the rest of the game, or you can give it to the person who's furthest behind and missing land drops, and they're going to be really thankful, and maybe they'll kill something you need killed later in the game. So I don't know. I love the design on this card, and it's also a pretty flavorful top-down Wedding Ring style design as well. So I love this card. I think it's a really sweet card.
I think this card is one of the most interesting from the sets for sure. It's a cool take. It's flavorful and everything. I think I would run it in a lot of mono white decks, to be honest, because chances are, if you're in mono white, try as I might, somebody's going to be drawing more cards than you, and that somebody is somebody who's not playing mono white, so you're always going to get better value out of this. And sure, you're like you said, you're helping your opponents, but if you're just jamming it into literally any mono white deck, odds are you're just going to get more value out of it than your opponent. And if you're way ahead of your opponent in terms of draw, and you're setting up somehow in mono white, I don't know how you're doing it, but somehow you're drawing a bajillion cards each turn, you're also in white, so you can just remove the Wedding Ring, right? You just destroy one of them and you're good. So I think this is a great card in mono white. It's something that I look forward to playtesting. I don't know if we'll be able to playtest it on Commander Clash, which is minor gripe, because who knows if I think it's a Commander set card. So I don't know if it's going to be actually coded on MTGO, which is womp womp, but I'm definitely going to be playing it in my paper decks, and it's one of the ones that I'm definitely most hyped for. If you did not have this on your list, I would be putting it here too.
Yeah, it's also just a super fun. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it also works so well for Eruth, Tormented Prophet, which we talked about earlier. Because you don't draw cards on your turn. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
I just want to do Eruth stacks so much.
That actually does sound super sweet. Yeah, I think just like sticking on the blue player, like that's pretty good. Sticking on the spellslinger player who's chaining together cantrips. So it does kind of, if you choose wisely, break the symmetry even without those shenanigans. And then if you do add in some of those other like clone effects and whatnot, it can get even more insane. So yeah, definitely a really sweet design. And again, I appreciate Wizards doing some new things for white card draw to hopefully improve the colors. So
and life gain.
and life gain. I mean, that's kind of, white's already so good at gaining life. To me, that's kind of like throwaway text, but I don't know. I guess like it does work with some of the cards that trigger off of you gaining life, like a Well of Lost Dreams, like having your opponent's life gain trigger that or something. I could see that being relevant is sometimes, but what are the odds that your opponent's going to be a life gain deck? That's the only thing. Like everyone draws cards every single turn, but gaining life is something that not every commander deck is doing with any amount of consistency. So I feel like that's going to come up a lot less often, but even without that, still good.
Jink, Tainted Remedy, Wedding Ring, new deck. New deck.
Broke it.
You're a life gain deck. Your opponent is not a life gain deck. You drop Wedding Ring. You drop Tainted Remedy. Suddenly, you're losing a bajillion life. Oh my god.
That actually, you have like 1 million stacks decks today, Tomer. Everything you have is some sort of stacksy brutal combo, which I'm totally here for. But
this is where my brain is at.
Let's move on. We got a new legendary creature, a Selesnya legend, Torrens, Fist of the Angels. Tomer, this is high on your list. What do you think about this one?
This card is like insane in terms of like a value engine. This is kind of like the creature version of like Mystic Monastery Mentor. That's the one. It's a white 3-drop that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put in a 1/1 token with prowess. This is kind of similar to that, except it's a creature version, the Selesnya version. It says whenever you cast a creature spell, you put a 1/1 green and white human soldier token with training. And training says whenever it attacks with another creature with greater power, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So these are, if you're a creature heavy deck, you put Torrens on the battlefield, and every single time you're casting a creature, you're also making a 1/1 green and white human creature token. And that's exactly what most creature decks want. They just want more creatures on the battlefield. These naturally also get bigger too, not as quickly as the Monastery Mentors tokens are. You can't really storm off and one-shot people. This is more gradual, but it does put +1/+1 counters on it. And there's a lot of Selesnya decks that are creature heavy that care about +1/+1 counters, and then having an efficient way of making a bunch of creatures that also put +1/+1 counters on themselves super efficiently is really, really good. So basically any Selesnya human deck really, really likes this because it's really good with like Catilda, Dawnhawk Prime, because it makes human creature tokens, so you can tap them for mana. It's really good with Kyler, I think is the other one. It's really good with all of them. They're all human soldiers. And it's also really good with +1/+1 counter style decks, for example, Hamza, Guardian of Eroshin, where you want to go wide and you want to have counters on them to give a massive discount to all the creature spells that you're casting. So it works in a lot of decks, and I think it's just like crazy value engine in basically all of them.
Yeah, this card is very, very strong in any deck that's in its colors and has a lot of creatures. I really like how this seems to be a pretty direct upgrade for some of the new commanders we got with our last Innistrad set, with Innistrad Midnight Hunt. You mentioned Kyler. It cares about humans going wide and cares about +1/+1 counters. Catilda is another one that wants you to go wide with humans and put +1/+1 counters on things. So Leonor, also, it's a way to trigger Coven. You're making these tokens and you're changing the power, so you got creatures of different power and it's putting counters on things. So I feel like this is a great card in the 99 for any humans deck. You could also play it out of the command zone. I think I'm more excited playing it in the 99. And then, as you mentioned, token style decks, as long as you got a reasonable number of creatures to cast, this could be really good. So I think it's just a really good card all around. I like the Monastery Mentor comparison. It is kind of slow. You're not going to have those big combo turns where you cast 5 spells and all of a sudden all your prowess monk tokens are just massive and killing people. They grow much slower. but still they grow very consistently in turn after turn. And if you're playing some +1/+1 counter shenanigans, like Leonor was a commander that I thought was like pretty bad, but it's pretty cute that you can cast a bunch of creatures and make a bunch of tokens, attack with torrens in all the 1/1s, put counters on them, and then use something like Leonor or something else to put a counter on torrens. So the next turn you can attack with that and grow your team again. So it definitely can snowball pretty hard. But yeah, this card's just, I think, really good all around for decks with a bunch of creatures.
I'm a big Hamza fan, so this I looked at Hamza, I looked at torrens, I was like, this is perfect.
Let's keep moving forward. Number 2 on my list, we're sticking in the realm of legends with Toxril the Corrosive, and I absolutely love this card. The big old slug horror. So, Toxril, it's huge. It puts a -1/-1 counter on all the, well, not a -1/-1 counter, a slime counter, which works like a -1/-1 counter, as long as it's on the battlefield, on all creatures you don't control on each of your end steps. And then when your opponent's creatures die and have a slime counter on them, you get a slug token and you can sacrifice slugs to draw cards. So Toxril, I think, is just a good top end threat, kind of generically. It's sort of like a weird take on Elish Norn, where you need it to stick around for a couple of turns, but if this sticks around, it is going to be just killing all of your opponent's things repeatedly every time around the table, because this triggers each end step. You're giving your opponent stuff -4/-4 in the form of these slime counters, which is pretty strong. Like, this is going to quickly eat away most of the board if this sticks out. And then as a bonus, you're getting these slimes, which you can turn into cards. So I think this is a solid like reanimation target out of the command zone. It's a repeatable wrath. You can build slug tribal, I guess, although I don't think there's enough slugs to really make that happen. But why I'm so high on this card though is what I want to build is like a dagger burn style deck with this card. I think the most fun way to build around Toxril is to play decks that give your opponent small creatures that then you can slime away, like playing things like Clackbridge Troll or Hunted Phantasm, that is giving your opponent, you're getting a over the curve creature and you're giving your opponent 5/1/1s or 3/1/1s, and then on the end step Toxril's going to eat those and it's going to turn them all into slugs, so you're actually getting all of those tokens, and then you have your Blood Artist effects or whatever you get for like killing creatures to drain your opponent out of the game. So I think it's actually a really, really fun build around commander if you want to go in that janky direction, but I just think this card's really cool all around. But Tomer, what do you think about Toxril?
I think you nailed it. It's a slug. I love the flavor. I love the fact that it's slime counters instead of just like -1/-1 counters. Like, sure, there's less synergy there, but it's slime counters. It's a slug monster. It's amazing. I also like the idea that you're going with where you dagger burn, as you called it, like Forbidden Orchard and stuff like that. Just like giving your opponents creatures super efficiently and then killing them for extra value is hilarious to me. For me though, I feel like a lot of people were getting a little bit salty when they saw this card. They're like, oh, this is going to kill all my creatures. Wah. You know what? Let's go full salt with this. Why not? Why not you pair Toxril with Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, which is going to turn all everybody's lanes into swamps. And then, like you said, with the Elish Norn comparison, so you have Toxril, you have Urborg, right? Everybody's lands are swamps. And then you add Cormus Bell, which is a little artifact that says all swamps are 1/1 black creatures. So everybody's lands are now 1/1 black creatures, swamp black creatures. And then Toxril at end step just kills all your opponent's creatures and makes a bunch of slugs. It's amazing.
That actually sounds super awesome. I like that it's janky. You need multiple cards to pull it off. So this isn't something that's going to happen like super consistently, but when it does, oh my goodness, are people going to be so angry? Also, there's one other card, one other creature, I should say, in Magic that can put slime counters on things, and that is a Sludge Monster. Sludge Monster was actually printed last in Innistrad set, and it makes it so all non-horror creatures with the slime counters are going to be 2/2s and lose all abilities. So it's kind of a 2-card combo where this Sludge Monster with Toxril will kill all of your opponent's stuff twice each turn cycle, essentially, because they're all going to be 2/2s with no abilities, and they get the -1/-1 counters for each slime counter. So I think that's a really cool way to build around it as well. So Toxril, I think it's sweet, and I love that salty plan of blowing up all your opponent's lands. And it probably does win you the game, because if you blow up your opponent's entire mana base, that's a lot of slugs you're going to get. You're going to make a huge board full of slugs, hopefully enough that you can kill your opponents pretty quickly. So that's kind of what I look for with mass land destruction. Like, can I close out the game quickly after I do this? And I think toxril with that janky combo should be able to pull it off. Well, let's keep moving on. Number 2 on our list, we got some lands to talk about. There's only 2 on screen, but this is the rest of the rare land cycle that we started with Innistrad Midnight Hunt. Tomer, you really like these lands for Commander. Why don't you tell us why?
So these are obviously kind of like, okay, they're lands, so like how hyped can you be? But let me tell you, friends, I'm actually very hyped for these because I'm going to be jamming them into like almost all my decks. So these slow lands, I don't know how good they are in standard. I don't see them that often outside of, the late game control decks. But in Commander, you're a 99 card singleton format. The odds of any of these slow lands being one of the first 2 lands you put onto the battlefield are pretty low. Odds are you're going to be playing it as your 3rd, 4th, or 5th land. So most of the time, these cards are lands that tap for 2 different colors, and they enter the battlefield untapped, which is a fantastic rate, and it makes them exceptionally good in 2-color and 3-color decks. The best mana bases are always the ones that tap for the most amount, like do the most mana fixing and enter the battlefield untapped. And generally speaking, you're going to be paying an arm and a leg to get that value out of it. Like if you do a fetch land, if you use fetch lands, shock lands, even like they're even like $20 and whatnot, or you go for like the original dual lands, which are like stupid amounts of money, make believe money at that point. These become very tantalizing. They're a big step up from like the temples and whatever tap lanes that are tap duels, and they're almost like battle bond lands, almost to the level of battle bond lands, because they're almost always going to be entering the battlefield untapped and tapping for 2 mana. So it's great. So I've just like any 2-color deck that can run a slow land is going to run a slow land, and 3-color decks I'm probably going to be running all the ones that are available to me as well. They're just that good, and I'm hoping they're going to be super budget friendly. Like if they're under $5 after standard rotates or whatever, I'm going to be insanely excited to run them even budget brews. So these are the cards, like of all the cards in the entire set, these are the ones that I'm going to be realistically seeing the most play in. So I had to give them a shout out, and I had to put them pretty high.
I think the Battle Bond lands is a really good comparison. That was actually the comparison I was thinking about making, because they are pretty much always going to come into play untapped when you want to. The exception is probably if you're playing super high powered like CDH style decks and you really care about on turn 1, on turn 2, having your lands come into play. Maybe you don't have that many lands on the battlefield, but if you think of a typical mid power Commander game, your opening hand, if you have less than 3 lands, you're probably throwing it back. It takes a pretty weird hand or maybe you have a bunch of ramp spells and then that would also work. But the odds of this actually hurting you and coming into play tapped with a keepable hand in a like mid-power game of Commander is pretty low. And then coming into play untapped for the whole rest of the game is a huge, huge upside. So I also like these quite a bit as well. And I think budget is a huge concern. Right now, the ones from Innistrad Midnight Hunt are like $4 to $5 even while they're in standard, which actually makes me pretty hopeful that maybe long term these lands are going to be like a couple of bucks. And if these lands do end up that cheap, they're probably going to be the best budget cycle that you can honestly play in all of Commander. Like you're coming to play untapped so often. Only downside is you don't get the land types, which I know mostly matters in higher budget decks with fetch lands, but it also does matter a little bit with things like Nature's Lore or other ramp style effects. But still, even considering that, I think these lands are super good, and I should probably play more of my Commander decks, honestly.
Yeah, and also for comparison for Battle Bond lands, I think the Battle Bond lands are a little bit better, marginally so, like we mentioned, because like the odds are so low that are going to be putting this in the top 2. But the Battle Bond lands right now, they're all like $30.
Yeah.
So you can't even call them budget options anymore. These are actually like if they're already like $4 to $5. I can imagine they're going to go down a little bit, maybe to $2 or $3 after that, and yeah, they're just excellent, especially if you're on a tighter budget. Like these are going to be perfect for you.
Well, let's move on to the number 1 card on my list, and you probably knew it was coming: Necro Duality. Necro Duality. I mean, it's kind of a take on Panharmonicon almost, except you're actually getting a creature token that's a copy, but only for zombies, 4 mana. When a non-token zombie enters the battlefield under your control, you get a token copy of that creature. It also calls back a little bit to Reflections of Lajara, but like way upgraded compared to Reflections of Lajara. But I think this card is really, really sweet. I will play this in every single zombie deck that is in my colors, and I expect that it will offer a decent amount of value. And then there's a lot of sweet shenanigans with this card. My favorite thing to do with this card, well, okay, let's start with the easy thing. The easy thing to do with this card is it works like a Panharmonicon with ETB triggers. You play a Grey Merchant of Asphodel, you get 2 Grey Merchants of Asphodel, and you drain your opponent for a ridiculous amount of damage, or like Joshu Vest or Noxious Ghoul. 2 of those, doubling up all your other zombies, you're just going to repeatedly wrath the board over and over again of all non-zombie creatures. So any of those ETB triggers are really good. But my favorite thing to do with this card, and what I can't wait to do, is there's this zombie called Sidraxis Alchemist. Sidraxis Alchemist, a very forgotten zombie. It is a random old common, but it is 3 mana. If you control a blue permanent, when it comes into play, you get to bounce a non-land permanent. So this is a way that you can just kind of go infinite, especially if you throw Rooftop Storm into the mix. If you can cast that for free and you have Sidraxis Alchemist, then all of a sudden you can make infinite copies of the Alchemist itself, because you cast it, you're going to get 2, but you can use it to bounce itself. So you can just keep casting it over and over again. And it also lets you pick up all your other zombies, so you can make infinite token copies of all your other zombies as well. There's also a combo with Bladewing the Risen. If you happen to be like a Grixis zombie deck, if you cast a Bladewing the Risen with this out, you get 2 of them, and you can legend rule the real copy and use the trigger to reanimate itself for infinite enter the battlefield triggers, infinite death triggers, infinite dragon reanimation. So I just love this card, and I think it's a huge upgrade over Reflections of Lajara. That's something people have asked me, like, okay, Reflections of Lajara, isn't that just the same thing? And it really isn't, for a couple of reasons. One is Necro Duality's a mana cheaper, but that's not the big reason. The big reason is it triggers when the creature enters the battlefield rather than being cast. In zombies in specific, they're a very recursive graveyardy style of deck, where you have zombies that are not necessarily being cast, but coming into play from your graveyard, being reanimated, and Necro Duality works with that as well. It also works with token shenanigans, which I have found out multiple times that the Reflections of Lajara effects don't actually work with anything like Doubling Season or Anointed Procession. For some reason, I still don't really fully understand, but they just don't, according to the rules, and this would. So this card is a card I just can't wait to play in Commander. I think it's going to be a blast, and I think it's a new staple for zombies. Like, I don't see a reason to not run this in literally any zombie deck that's in its colors. But Tomer, what do you think about this one?
I think you nailed it. This card is absolutely insane, and it's so much better than Reflections of Lajara for all the reasons you said. Cheaper and enter the battlefield. It triggers it too. It's kind of insane that I would say Zombie Tribal, of all the tribes that were showcased and supported in the new Innistrad sets, Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, I wouldn't say Midnight Hunt was the werewolf set, and I wouldn't say the Crimson Vow was the vampire set. I would say both of those are the zombie set. We've gotten so many insane upgrades, so many insane staples to Zombie Tribal in the last 2 sets, and they were already like probably the best supported tribe already. So like the bar for getting new staples into these tribes is so high because we've gotten so many years, decades of support for Zombie Tribal, that to have like something pop up that is like, all right, I'm going to put this in every single zombie deck is so, it should be so rare. But Necro Duality is like, I looked at it and I'm like, yep, I have to make a cut for the 99. It's going to be really tough to make a cut, but this card has to be in there, right? Yeah. It's like insane with like a zombie apocalypse, for example. You're saying like recursion is like a zombie thing. Zombie apocalypse, put all your zombies on the battlefield. Oh, you get to make an extra copy of every single one of them. It makes a combo with Sidraxis, which is kind of like a blast of the past. I played at Thraxmundar. Zombie Tribal is one of the first commander decks I ever made. So like I remembered that card. I'm like, where are you going with this? But Rooftop Storm is like insane with it. Gravecrawler Phyrexian Altar is also, again, like just infinite Gravecrawlers, infinite mana, just like silliness. It's just insane. You either play it fairly and it's insane, or you play it brokenly and you just combo off and win the game with it. Also, I want to say I don't have a zombie deck, but I do have a tribal deck. This is going into tribal because all the changelings are zombies.
Oh yeah, that seems really good there. You can play it with a Masquid Nexus in basically any deck for that matter. So yeah, that is another cool home. Last thing about this card, I feel like this effect is also really well suited for zombies because zombies, the good ones outside of your commanders, are generally not legendary. That's the other problem I've run into with the Reflections of Lajara in some decks, is so many creatures are legendary that some tribes really struggle, like humans. There's a lot of really powerful legendary humans now, and you end up just legendary rolling yourself all the time. But many of the best zombies, like I said, outside of the ones in your command zone, are non-legendary, and you're playing all these zombie lords and just doubling those up is insane, and undead war chiefs, and any of that stuff is going to be really, really powerful. So yeah, necro duality card I can't wait to build around, and it's going to be a blast. But Tomer, I want to see what's number 1 on your list, and that is a vampire. We're going back to blood tokens. Blood Vial Purveyor. Tomer, what are you doing with this big 4-drop?
Okay, so this is a card that probably is going to be a little bit bizarre. Because I don't see anybody really talking about this other than people were like, hey, the art looks like Spice 8 Rack. Like that was the only comment that I saw in editors. You could throw on a picture. It really does. This is like Spice 8 Rack in like 20 more years. But I think the mechanic of this card is super fun. We're talking about like how easy it is for us to make blood tokens. And this one is an incredibly efficient blood token generator. But there's a catch. Your opponents are the ones making blood tokens. So whenever they cast a spell, they create a blood token. How many spells is an opponent casting each turn? Probably at least 2, So they'd be making 1, 2 blood tokens each turn, possibly even way more. So the amount of blood tokens stacks up really, really fast. And the payoff for that, at least for Blood Vial Purveyor, is that you have this flying trample 5/6 beater for 4 that, as they're making more and more blood tokens, if they're not destroying them somehow, they're either popping them, activating their ability, or sacrificing them some other way. If they're not getting rid of them, you're going to be smacking for a lot of damage. And yeah, it's more relevant damage when in a 20 life format, like 1 versus 1, where this is going to kill you a lot faster. When you have double the life total, you're going to kill slower, but still, it's quite the clock. Like you're going to be hitting for like 10 flying trample? That's going to kill people pretty quickly. But yeah, this kind of got my jank brew juices flowing. I thought like, hey, wait, so we're giving our opponents a bunch of free artifacts essentially super efficiently, and they have to get rid of them somehow. So first, step 1, we want to make sure that they can't get rid of them. So boom, we're going to play Karn the Great Creator. We're going to shut off our opponent's abilities to activate artifacts. So it shuts off their mana rocks, great. But most importantly, it shuts off their blood tokens so they can't sacrifice them for value. Or, you know what? If you're sacrificing them, what if we're running Viridian Revel? It's a green enchantment that nobody plays. So whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. So yeah, you can crack those blood tokens to survive the Purveyor, but I'm going to draw a card every single time you do that. Oh, what about Curious Horde? You choose target opponent, you make a horde of freaking green beast tokens for every single artifact they control, or you do like Ancient Runes and they take damage equals the number of artifacts they control each upkeep. You just go wild with it. You do Dockside Extortionist, you make a bunch of treasure for every single artifact and enchantment they have. You just go deep. You build an entire deck around Blood Vial Purveyor effects. Every effect that can give your opponents artifacts and then punishes your opponents for having a lot of artifacts. So this is like the ultimate jank deck. It sounds so bad. It's going to be a Jund deck and it's terrible, but I can't wait to play it because it's so stupid. I love it. That
actually sounds super fun. I had another very janky idea for this card. The first thing I thought of was kind of like a reverse Eloise combo. Eloise likes March of the Machines to turn all of its clues into creatures, which die, which trigger Eloise. But you could do something similar with this, where if you have a March of the Machines out, all those blood tokens are going to be creatures, but they're going to be 0/0, so they're immediately going to die. And then you play your, Blood Artists or whatever effects trigger off creatures dying. And basically, whenever your opponent casts a spell, an artifact's going to the graveyard, a creature's going to the graveyard, so you can stack up all those style of effects and maybe kill your opponent that way too. So I think this card it's really neat. I don't know if I think it's very good if you're just going to play it fairly in Commander, but when you're building around it, oh my goodness, it can do some really cool, really unique things.
This is why we said at the beginning how this is not a power level ranking thing, because if we're talking about most powerful cards in the set, this would be like near the very bottom. But because it's a hype list, this is what I'm the most hyped for. I'm building a Jund, janky, give your opponent's artifact deck, and it's going to be built around this style of card. So yeah, super fun.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 Commander cards from Innistrad Crimson Vow. So now that you've heard our favorite cards from the set, make sure to let us know in the comments, what are your favorite cards? What are you most hyped to build around? What jank combos and synergies are you excited for? Let us know. Also, Tomer, thanks for hanging out and do it. It's always a blast when we get to do these videos.
My pleasure. I always look forward to these.
So thanks for watching, everyone. Again, let us know in the comments what you're hyped for from the set, and we will talk to you soon. Looking for even more Innistrad Crimson Vow coverage? Well, make sure to check out some other great videos here and here.